Hello everyone. Welcome to our channel. I'm very excited today to talk about effective speaking in spontaneous situations. I thank you all for joining us, even though the title of my talk is grammatically incorrect. I thought that might scare a few of you away. But I learned from teaching here at the business school that catching people's attention is hard. So, something as simple as that, I thought, might draw a few of you in. This is going to be a highly interactive and participative workshop today. If you don't feel comfortable participating, that's completely fine, but do know that I'm going to ask you to talk to the people next to you. There will be opportunities to stand up and practice some things because I believe the way we become effective communicators is by actually communicating. So, let's get started right away. I'd like to ask you all to read this sentence. As you read it, what's most important to me is that you count the number of F's in the sentence. Please count the number of F's. Keep it to yourself. I'll give you just another couple of seconds. 3, 2, 1. Raise your hand, please, if you found 3 and only 3 F's. Excellent, great. Did anybody find 4? Anybody find only 5? Anybody find 6? There are 6 F's. What two-letter word ending in F did many of us miss? We'll make sure to get this to you so you can torment your friends and family later. When I was first exposed to this over 12 years ago, I only found 3, and I felt really stupid. So, I like to start every workshop and every class I teach by passing that feeling along. No, that's not why I do this. I do this because it's a perfect analogy for what we're going to talk about today. The vast majority of us in this room, very smart people, were not as effective as we could have been in this activity. We didn't get it right. And the same is true when it comes to speaking in public, particularly spontaneous speaking. It's the little things that make a big difference in being effective. So, today, we're going to talk about the little things, your approach, your attitude, your practice, that can change how you feel when you speak in public. And we're going to focus primarily on one type of public speaking, not the kind that you plan for in advance, the kind where you spend time thinking about what to say or even create slides, not keynotes, conference presentations, or formal toasts. We are talking about spontaneous speaking, when you are put on the spot and asked to speak off the cuff, in the moment. What we're going through today is actually the result of a workshop I created for the business school. Several years ago, a survey was taken among students, asking what could be done to help them be more successful here. At the top of the list was responding to cold calls. Does everybody know what a cold call is? It's when a professor, like me, suddenly looks at a student and asks, "What do you think?" And that moment is often met with panic and silence. As a result of that, this workshop was created. A vast majority of first-year students at the GSB go through it. So today, I'm going to walk you through a hybrid version of what they experience. The reality is that spontaneous speaking is actually more prevalent than planned speaking. Maybe it's giving introductions at a dinner when someone asks you to introduce a guest. Maybe it's giving feedback when your boss suddenly turns to you and asks for your opinion. It could be an unexpected toast, or it could be handling Q&A after a presentation. Speaking of Q&A, we will leave plenty of time at the end of today's session for your questions about this topic or any related to communication. Our agenda is simple. 1. To be an effective communicator, whether in planned or spontaneous situations, you need to manage anxiety. So, we'll start there. 2. We'll discuss some ground rules for today's interactive exercises. 3. Then, we'll dive into the heart of today's workshop, with lots of activities where I invite you to participate. So, let's start with anxiety management. 85% of people say they feel nervous when speaking in public. I think the other 15% are lying. We could easily put them in a situation where they'd feel nervous too. In fact, just this past week, a study from Chapman University asked Americans what they fear most. Among threats like terrorist attacks and identity theft, public speaking ranked in the top 5 fears. It's a widespread fear, but one that we can learn to manage. I say manage very carefully because I don't believe we should try to eliminate it completely. Anxiety can actually help us. It gives us energy, helps us focus, and signals that what we're doing is important. But we need to learn to manage it. So I'd like to introduce you to a few research-backed techniques that can help. But before we dive in, let me ask you, how do you feel when you watch a nervous speaker present? Just shout out a few things. Audience: uncomfortable, uncomfortable. I heard many of you going, yes, uncomfortable. It feels very awkward, doesn't it? So what do we do? Now, a couple of you probably like watching somebody suffer, but most of us don't. So what do? We sit there, we nod, we smile, or we disengage. And to the nervous speaker looking out at his or her audience, seeing a bunch of people nodding or disengaged, that does not help. Okay, so we need to manage our anxiety. Fundamentally, your job as a communicator, regardless of whether it's planned or spontaneous, is to make your audience comfortable. Because if they're comfortable, they can receive your message. And when I say comfortable, I'm not referring to the fact that your message has to be sugar-coated and nice for them to hear. It can be a harsh message, but they have to be in a place where they can receive it. So, it's incumbent on you as a communicator to help your audience feel comfortable, and we do that by managing our anxiety. Let me introduce you to a few techniques that I think you can use right away to help you feel more comfortable. The first has to do with when you begin to feel those anxiety symptoms. For most people, this happens in the initial minutes prior to speaking. In this situation, many of us begin to feel whatever it is that happens to us. Maybe your stomach gets a little gurgle. Maybe your legs begin to shake. Maybe you start to perspire. And then we start to say to ourselves, "Oh my goodness, I'm nervous. Oh, they're going to tell I'm nervous. This is not going to go well." And we start spiraling out of control. However, research on mindful attention tells us that when we begin to feel those anxiety symptoms, we should simply greet our anxiety and say, "Hey, this is me feeling nervous. I'm about to do something of consequence." Simply by greeting your anxiety and acknowledging that it is normal and natural, heck, 85% of people tell us they experience it, you can actually stem the tide of that anxiety spiraling out of control. It may not necessarily reduce the anxiety, but it will stop it from spinning out. So, the next time you begin to feel those anxiety signs, take a deep breath and say, "This is my feeling anxious." I notice a few of you taking notes. There's a handout that will come at the end. It has everything I'm supposed to say, okay? I can't guarantee I'm going to say it exactly as planned, but you'll have it there. In addition to this approach, another technique that works very well, and this is one I helped research way back in graduate school, has to do with reframing how you see the speaking situation. Most of us, when we are up presenting, whether planned or spontaneous, feel that we have to do it right. We feel like we are performing. How many of you have ever acted, sung, or danced? Don't worry, I'm not going to ask for performances now. Many of you have. Maybe next year we could do a talent show for alumni. It looks like we've got some talent here, which is great. When you perform, you know there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. If you don't hit the right note, say the right line at the right time, or stand in the right place, you've made a mistake. It messes up the audience, and it messes up the people on stage. But when you present, there is no single right way. There are certainly better and worse ways, but there is no one correct way to do it. So, we need to shift our perspective and stop viewing presenting as a performance. Instead, I'd like to suggest that we see it as a conversation. Right now, I'm having a conversation with over 100 people rather than performing for you. However, simply labeling it as a conversation is not enough. I want to give you some concrete strategies to make it feel that way. First, start with questions. Questions, by their very nature, are dialogic. They create a two-way interaction. What was one of the very first things I did here today? I had you count the number of F's and raise your hands. I asked you a question. That simple act gets your audience involved and makes the presentation feel more like a conversation. So, use questions. They can be rhetorical, or they can be polling questions where I actually want to hear information from you. In fact, I use questions even when creating an outline for my presentations. Rather than writing bullet points, I list the questions I intend to answer. This technique helps put me in a conversational mindset. If you were to look at my notes for today's talk, you'd see just a series of questions. Right now, I'm answering the question, how do we manage our anxiety? Beyond questions, another powerful technique to create a conversational tone is to use conversational language. Many nervous speakers unconsciously distance themselves physically. If you've ever seen a nervous speaker, they might say something like, "Welcome, I am really excited to be here with you," while pulling as far away from the audience as possible. Why? Because you, the audience, make us nervous, and we instinctively want to create distance. The same thing happens linguistically. Nervous speakers often use formal, distancing language. It's not unusual to hear someone say, "One must consider the ramifications," or "Today, we will cover step 1, step 2, and step 3. That type of phrasing creates separation. To be more conversational, use inclusive and natural language. Instead of saying, "One must consider," try, "This is important to you," or "We all need to be concerned with." Do you hear how that sounds more engaging? It's all in the pronouns. Instead of rigidly listing steps, try saying, "First, what we need to do is this," or "The second thing you should consider is." Simple shifts in language make a big difference in making your speech feel like a conversation. And as a bonus, being conversational also helps you manage anxiety. The third technique I'd like to share comes from research I started as an undergraduate. I was fortunate to study with Phil Zimbardo, famous for my prison experiment. Many people don't know that Zimbardo was instrumental in founding one of the first shyness institutes in the world. I worked with him on research that examined how your orientation to time influences how you react to situations. What we found is that if you can bring yourself into the present moment, rather than worrying about future consequences, you can actually reduce nervousness. Most of us, when we present, are worried about the future. My students worry about their grades. Some of you may worry about getting funding, securing support, or receiving from your audience. All of these concerns are focused on the future. If we can bring ourselves into the present, we become less concerned about those future outcomes, which in turn makes us less nervous. There are many ways to shift into the present moment. I know a professional speaker who gets paid $10,000 an hour to speak. Great gig, right? He still gets nervous. Before he steps on stage in front of thousands of people, he does 100 push-ups. You can't be that physically active and not be in the present moment. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of us should go that far. He does start his speech out of breath and sweaty. But even a simple walk around the building before speaking can help. Other techniques include listening to music, just like athletes do before a big game, or mentally engaging in an activity like counting backward from 100 by 17s. Try it. After the third or fourth number, it gets tough. My personal favorite way to get present-oriented is using tongue twisters. Saying a tongue twister forces you to focus, because if you don't, you'll say it wrong. Plus, it has the added benefit of warming up your voice, something most nervous speakers forget to do. Instead of retreating inward and filling your mind with self-doubt, try saying a tongue twister out loud. Remember, I said today we'd have a lot of participation. Now, I'd like you to repeat after me my favorite tongue twister. I like this one because if you say it wrong, you say a naughty word, and I'll be listening. Here we go. I slit a sheet. A sheet I slit. And on that slitted sheet, I sit. Very good. No slips. Excellent. In that moment, you weren't worried about being in front of all these people or about how weird it was that I asked you to do this. You were completely focused on saying it correctly and figuring out what the naughty word was. That's how easy it is to bring yourself into the present. Managing anxiety is possible. We can do it by greeting our anxiety when we first feel it, by reframing speaking as a conversation, and by shifting our focus to the present moment. These are just 3 of many tools available to help you. If you have questions about other strategies, I'd be happy to chat with you. Reason. At the end of this session, I'll point you to some resources that can help you find additional information. But for now, let's dive into the core of today's discussion: how to feel more comfortable speaking in spontaneous situations. To begin, I want to establish some simple ground rules. First, I'll identify 4 critical steps to becoming more effective at speaking in spontaneous situations. With each step, I'll ask you to participate in an activity. None of these exercises will be more uncomfortable than saying a tongue twister out loud. Some may require you to stand up or talk to the person next to you, but I promise, none will be painful. Finally, I'll conclude with a phrase or saying from the world of improvisation. For the past 5 years, I've co-taught a class at Stanford's Continuing Studies program with Adam Tobin, a lecturer in the Creative Arts Department. He teaches film and new media and is an expert in improv. Together, we've developed a course called Improvisationally Speaking to help people become more confident in spontaneous speaking. Adam has taught me many valuable phrases and techniques from improv, which I'll share with you today because they truly stick. At the end of this session, you'll receive a handout summarizing everything we discuss. Let's get started. The biggest obstacle to spontaneous speaking is ourselves. We get in our own way. We strive for perfection. We want to say the right thing, deliver the perfect toast, or give the most memorable response. But our effort to be perfect can actually make spontaneous speaking harder. The first step to overcoming this is to get out of our own way. Of course, that's easier said than done. Many of us in this room are high achievers. We think fast, work hard, and strive for excellence. But when it comes to speaking in the moment, this can be a disadvantage. To illustrate this, I'd like to do a quick exercise, and I'll need your help. This activity is called Shout the Wrong Name. In a moment, if you are able and willing, I'll ask you to stand. For about 30 seconds, you'll look around the room and point at different objects. Yes, I know it's rude to point, but for this exercise, please do it. As you point at something, you must call it anything but what it actually is. For example, I might point to this chair and say, refrigerator. I might point at my notebook and say, cat. You can even point at the person next to you and call them something random. The key is to shout the wrong name. Now, before we begin, raise your hand if you've already thought of 5 or 6 words you're going to say. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're already strategizing. Your brain is trying to help you get it right, even though the whole point of this exercise is that there is no right way to do it. In fact, the only way you can do this activity wrong is by overthinking it. Even if you accidentally call a chair, there's no penalty. No one will know what you were pointing at. Maybe you meant the floor beneath the chair. The point is, we often plan ahead because we're wired to get things right, even in situations where there is no right answer. So, let's try this. We'll play for 30 seconds. If you are willing and able, please stand up. You can also do this seated, but standing makes it more engaging. Ready? Begin. The room fills with voices. Porcupine, salt shaker, tennis racket, purple, orange, library, car, and time. Stay standing if you're comfortable, because we'll do this again in a moment. First, thank you. That was fantastic. I heard some creative words, and some of you even looked like you were doing a synchronized 70s disco dance. Now, let me ask, did you notice any patterns in the words you were saying? Maybe some of you started listing fruits and vegetables. Or perhaps you were naming objects alphabetically? That's your brain, still trying to create a system. Even after I told you not to plan ahead, your brain found a workaround. And that's okay. Your brain wants to help you succeed. But in spontaneous speaking, we need to train ourselves to let go of those patterns. When we teach our improvisationally speaking class, we like to say that our brain is like a windshield wiper. It gives us suggestions, but sometimes we need to wipe them away and see what happens. So we're going to try this again. This time, if you catch yourself using a pattern, maybe you're listing colors or objects from your office, just say, "Thank you, brain," and move on. Let's see what happens when we don't stockpile words or follow a system. This time, we'll do it for just 15 seconds. Baby steps. Ready? Begin. The room fills with more random words. Kodak, bicycle chain, skateboard, bananas, putrid, and time. Please have a seat. Did you notice a difference between the first and second rounds? Was it easier the second time? No? That's okay. These skills aren't like a light switch. You don't suddenly get them. They take practice. This is a fantastic game to train your brain to stop overthinking and to get out of its own way. And the best part? You can play this game anytime, anywhere. Personally, I like to do it when I'm stuck in traffic. Instead of yelling naughty words at other drivers, I shout random words. It helps. You're training yourself to get out of your own way. You're working against the muscle memory that you've developed over the course of your life, with a brain that acts very fast to help you solve problems. But in spontaneous speaking situations, you put too much pressure on yourself, trying to figure out how to get it right. A game like this teaches us to get out of our own way. It helps us recognize the things we do that prevent us from acting spontaneously. In essence, we are reacting rather than responding. To react means to act again. You've thought it, and now you're acting on it. That takes too long and is too thoughtful. We want to respond in a way that is genuine and authentic. One of the maxims I'd like for you to take from this, which comes from improvisation, is one of my favorites. Dare to be dull. In a room like this, telling you to dare to be dull may sound offensive, and I apologize. But trust me, this will help. Rather than striving for greatness, dare to be dull. If you allow yourself to be dull, you will actually reach greatness. It's when you set greatness as your target that it gets in the way of you ever getting there. You over-evaluate, you over-analyze, and you freeze up. So, the first step in our process today is to get out of our own way. Dare to be dull. Easier said than done, but once you practice, even with a simple game like the one we played, you'll get better at it. However, that's not enough. Getting out of our own way is important, but the second step of our process requires us to change how we see the situation we find ourselves in. We need to view every speaking opportunity as an opportunity rather than a challenge or a threat. When I coach executives on Q&A skills, whether they're speaking to the media, investors, or an audience, they often see it as an adversarial experience, me versus them. One of the first things I work on is shifting their mindset. A Q&A session, for example, is an opportunity. It's a chance to clarify, to understand what people are thinking, and to engage in meaningful dialogue. When we see it as an opportunity, it feels different. Our perspective shifts, and we have more freedom to respond. If I feel that you are challenging me, I am going to do the bare minimum to respond and protect myself. But if I see it as an opportunity, a chance to explain, expand, and connect, I will interact with you differently. Spontaneous speaking situations afford us opportunities. So when you're at a corporate dinner and your boss turns to you and says, "Oh, you know him better than the rest. Would you mind introducing him?" Instead of panicking and thinking, "Oh no, I better get this right," say, "Great, thank you for the opportunity." See the shift in perspective? I have a fun game to help us practice this. With the holidays approaching, we are all going to be giving and receiving gifts. Here's how the game works. It works best if you have a partner, so I hope you can work with someone sitting next to you. If not, introduce yourself to someone nearby. This is a great way to connect. If you don't have a partner, you can still play alone, though you won't be able to do the second part. Here's how it works. You and your partner will exchange imaginary gifts. Pretend you have a gift. It can be big or small, and give it to your partner. Your partner will take the gift, open it, and then tell you what you gave them. You have no idea what's inside the box, so when they open it, they will name whatever comes to mind first, not the thing you just thought of, not even the thing after that. The first thing that comes to mind. My favorite moment while playing this game was when someone opened a gift and found a frog leg inside. I don't know why, but that's what they saw, and that was the gift. That's the first part of the activity. Now, the real opportunity in this game is for the gift giver. After the receiver names their gift, say, "Thank you for giving me a frog's leg," the giver must respond with, "I knew you wanted a frog's leg because," and complete the sentence. No matter what the receiver says, the giver has to justify the gift. This is a great exercise in spontaneity and thinking on your feet. Some of you may be thinking, "Oh, this is hard. I don't want to make a fool of myself." Others of you, if you're following this advice, are thinking, "What a great opportunity." That's the mindset shift we want. So, let's play. Each of you will exchange a gift with your partner. One of you will start, then the other will follow. The first person will give a gift, and the second person will open the imaginary box and name whatever they see inside. Then, the giver must justify why they chose that gift. Remember, there is no wrong way to do this. The box can be huge, and you might find a single penny inside. It doesn't matter. Just go with it. Now quickly find a partner. Everyone got one? Great. In your pairs, decide who will go first. Person B will start. B, give a gift to A. A, open the box and thank B for whatever you find inside. Then, B will justify why they gave it to you. Go. Activity ensues. If you haven't switched yet, please do so now. Let's wrap it up in the next 30 seconds. Activity concludes. All right, everyone, please take your seats. I know I'm asking a room full of MBAs to stop talking, and that's a challenge. But let's wrap this up. Now let me ask, did you get what you wanted? Pretty neat, huh? You always get what you want in this game. For some of you, this was hard because you truly waited to see what was in the box rather than planning in advance. Did anyone find themselves surprised by what they discovered? What was in your box? What? Oh, ooh, nice. If you've got a Ferrari, you need a transmission. I like it. Who else found something that was surprising? What did you find? A live unicorn. That's a great gift, right? How was it as the gift giver? Were you surprised at what your partner found in the box? Isn't it interesting that when we give an imaginary gift, knowing that the person is going to name it, we already have in mind what they're going to find? And when they say live unicorn, we go, well, that's interesting, right? So the point of this game is, first, to remind ourselves that we have to get out of our own way, like we talked about before. But it is also to see this as an opportunity and to have fun. I love watching people play this game. The number of smiles I saw among you was incredible, and I have to admit, when we first started, some of you looked a little doubtful. But in that last game, you all were smiling and looked like you were having fun. When you reframe the spontaneous speaking opportunity as something you co-create and share, suddenly you are less nervous, less defensive, and able to accomplish something great. In this case, it was a fun outcome. This reminds us of perhaps the most famous of all improvisation sayings, yes, and. A lot of us live our communication lives saying, no, but. However, yes, and opens up a tremendous number of opportunities. This doesn't mean you have to say yes and to every question someone asks. It just means shifting your approach to the situation. If you're asked a question, think of it as an opportunity. Yes, and I will follow through, instead of no and being defensive. So far, we have accomplished the first two steps of our process. First, we get out of our own way. Second, we reframe the situation as an opportunity. The next phase is also challenging but rewarding. We must slow down and listen. You need to understand the demands of the situation in order to respond appropriately. However, we often jump ahead. We listen just enough to think we got it, and then we start preparing our response before the other person has even finished speaking. Instead, we need to truly listen. As a communicator, your job is to serve your audience. If you don't understand what your audience is asking or needs, you can't fulfill that obligation. So, we need to slow down and listen. I have a fun game to play. In this game, you are going to spellingyoursayoupartner. I'll translate. You're going to get with the same partner you just worked with and have a brief conversation about something fun you plan to do today. However, you're going to spell out everything you say. It's okay if you're not a good speller. You'll see the benefit of doing this. With your partner, person A will go first. Simply spell out what fun thing you're going to do today. Don't just choose something easy to spell like FEEDTHECAT to avoid the challenge. Use big words. All right, 30 seconds each. Spell out something fun that you're going to do today. Would you like to play? After the game. So, what did we learn? Besides the fact that we're not all great at spelling? You had to pause between words. How did this change your interaction with your partner? What did you have to do? You had to focus. You had to listen. You couldn't think ahead. You had to stay in the moment. When you truly listen and understand what the other person is trying to say, you can respond in a better, more targeted way. We often don't listen. We start by getting out of our own way. Then we reframe the situation as an opportunity. These are internal shifts, but in the moment of interaction, we must listen first before we can respond to a spontaneous request. One of my favorite maxims comes from this activity. Don't just do something, stand there. Listen. Truly listen, and then respond. Now, how do we respond? That brings us to the fourth part of our process. We must tell a story. We need to respond in a structured way because all stories have structure. The key to successful spontaneous speaking and planned speaking is having a structure. I want to introduce you to two of the most prevalent, popular, and useful structures for communicating in a spontaneous situation. But before we get there, let's talk about the value of structure. It increases what is called processing fluency, the ease and effectiveness with which we process information. In fact, we process structured information roughly 40% more efficiently than unstructured information. I love looking at this audience because you probably remember, as I do, what it was like to memorize phone numbers. Back in the day, if you wanted to call someone, you had to remember their number. Today, young people don't need to remember phone numbers. They just look at a picture, press a button, and suddenly a voice starts talking on the other end. 10-digit phone numbers. It's actually hard to remember them. How did you do it? You chunked it into a structure. 3, 3, and 4. Structure helps us remember. The same is true when speaking, whether spontaneously or in a planned situation. Let me introduce you to two useful structures. The first one you've probably heard of or used in some form, the problem-solution-benefit structure. You start by talking about what the issue is, the problem. Then, you discuss a way to solve it. Finally, you highlight the benefits of following through on the solution. This method is very persuasive and effective. It helps you, as the speaker, remember your points and helps your audience know where you're going with them. When I was a tour guide on this campus many years ago, do you know what the single most important thing they drilled into our heads was? It took a full quarter of training to become a tour guide here. They used to line us up at one end of the quad and have us walk backward in a straight line. If you failed, you had to start over. To this day, I can walk backward in a straight line because of that training. But what was the most important lesson they taught us? Never lose your tour group. I'm not joking. Never lose your tour group. The same is true as a presenter. Never lose your audience. The way to keep your audience engaged is by providing structure. None of you would go on a tour with me if I simply said, "Hi, my name's Matt, let's go." You would want to know where you're going, why you're going there, and how long it will take. You need to set expectations, and structure does that. Problem-solution-benefit is a wonderful structure to have in your back pocket. It's something you can use quickly in the moment. You can also reframe it so that it's not always about a problem. It could be an opportunity. Maybe there's a market opportunity you want to capture. It's not a problem that we aren't doing it, but we could be better off if we did. In that case, the structure becomes opportunity solution benefit. Another equally effective structure is the what so, what now, what framework. You start by explaining what something is, then discuss why it's important, and finally outline the next steps. This is a fantastic formula for answering questions or introducing people. For example, if I have to introduce someone on the spot, I change the what to who. I say who they are, why they are important, and what we're going to do next, whether that's listening to them speak or drinking our wine. The reality is that when you are in a spontaneous speaking situation, you have to do two things at once: figure out what to say and how to say it. These structures help you with the how. If you become comfortable with these structures, you will be able to respond effectively in spontaneous speaking situations. Now, let's practice, because that's what we do. Here's the situation. Is everybody familiar with this child's toy? It's a slinky. You are going to sell this slinky to your partner using either problem solution benefit or opportunity solution benefit. What does the slinky provide? Alternatively, you could use what so, what now. What? What is it? Why is it important? What are the next steps? Perhaps buying it. Notice how using a structure already helps focus your response. Get with your partner. Only one of you will sell the slinky while the other listens. Please begin after the activity. So, we have the handouts, but I'll also be using the microphone. When I debrief this, you can go ahead and pass them out. Does that make sense? Great. 30 more seconds, please. Excellent. Let's all close the deal. Seal the deal. I have never seen more people in one place doing this at the same time. I love it. I teach people to gesture and gesture big. This is great. If you were the recipient of the sales pitch, thumbs up. Did they do a good job? Did they use the structure? Awesome. I'm recruiting all of you for my next business as my salespeople. Please try to ignore this, but as we speak, the handout I mentioned earlier is being passed around. On the back, you'll find a list of structures, the two we discussed and several others, that can help you in spontaneous speaking situations. These structures are valuable because they help you figure out how to say what you want to say. Structure sets you free. I know that sounds ironic, but it's true. When you have a structure, you're free to focus on your message rather than worrying about how to organize your thoughts. This reduces the cognitive load of spontaneous speaking. So, what does this all mean? It means that we have within us the tools and approaches to succeed in spontaneous speaking situations. The first thing we must do is manage our anxiety, because you can't be an effective speaker if you don't have your anxiety under control. We talked about how to do this. Greet your anxiety, reframe speaking as a conversation, and be present in the moment. Once you do that, you need to practice 4 key steps to help you speak spontaneously. First, get out of your own way. I would love it if, on your way to the football game, you all pointed at things and called them by the wrong name. It'll be fun. If most of us do it, then it won't be weird. If only 1 or 2 of us do it, well, then it will be weird, right? Second, give gifts. By that, I mean, see your interactions as opportunities, not challenges. Third, take the time to listen. Listen. And finally, use structures. You have to practice these structures. I practice these structures on my kids. I have 2 kids. When they ask me questions, I usually answer them with, "What? So what? Now what?" They don't know it, but when they visit their friends' houses and see their friends ask their dads questions, they don't get what, so what, now what. So you have to practice. The more you practice, the more comfortable you will become. Ultimately, you have the opportunity before you to become more compelling, more confident, and more connected as a speaker if you leverage these techniques. If you're interested in learning more, here's where I do a little plug. I've written a book. Many of the MBA students who take the strategic communication classes I and others teach read it. It's called Speaking Up Without Freaking Out. More importantly, I curate a website called nofreakingspeaking.com. It has lots of information that I and others have written about how to become more effective at speaking. That's the end of my plug. What I'd really like to do now is enter into a spontaneous speaking situation with you. I'd love to entertain any questions you have. There are 2 people running around with microphones. So for those of us who remember the Phil Donahue show, we're going to do a little bit of that. If you have a question, the microphone will come to you and I'll be happy to answer it. Audience member. Yeah, I think if you... Moderator. Is it on? Audience member. Yep. We can hear you. Audience member. Great. Can you talk about hostile situations? Hostile situations? Yes. When you find yourself in a challenging situation, first, it should not be a surprise to you. Before you ever speak, you should think about what the environment is going to be like. So, it shouldn't surprise you that there might be challenges in the room. When hostile situations arise, you have to acknowledge them. If someone says, "That's a ridiculous idea. Why did you come up with that?" You can simply say, "So the idea I came up with was..." Acknowledge the emotion, but I recommend not naming the emotion. If you say, "You sound really angry," the person might respond, "I'm not angry, I'm frustrated." Now you're arguing over their emotional state. Instead, say something like, "I hear you have a lot of passion on this issue," or "I hear there's great concern from you." Acknowledging the emotion prevents it from lingering in the room. Then reframe and respond in a way that makes sense. If someone says, "Your product is ridiculously priced. Why do you charge so much?" You can say, "I hear great concern, and what you're really asking about is the value of our product." Then provide your value proposition and conclude, "Because of the value we provide, we believe it's priced fairly." You're still answering the question about price, but in a way that makes you feel more comfortable. The key to handling hostile situations is practicing the skills we just discussed. The only additional skill is the awareness that you might be in that situation. First, you have to truly listen to what you're hearing. When we hear a challenging question, it's easy to become defensive and not really hear what the person is asking. Instead, see it as an opportunity to reframe and explain. Again, you have to practice. That's how I think you address it. Are there other questions? I see a question back here. Yes, please. Audience member. First of all, thank you very much. Great presentation. Speaker. Thank you. Audience member. For a lot of the speaking I do, I have remote audiences. Audiences distributed all over the country using telecom. Any tips for those kinds of audiences? When you're speaking in a situation where not everyone is co-located, like right now as some people are watching this presentation remotely, you need to be mindful of it. Second, try to include engagement techniques where the audience actually has to do something. Physical participation is what we did here with the games. You can ask your audience to imagine something. Imagine what it would be like if, instead of simply stating a goal, you framed it as, imagine what it would be like if, see what that does to you. It pulls you in. I can also take polling questions. Most of the technology you are referring to has some kind of polling feature. You can open up a wiki, Google Doc, or another collaborative tool where people can actively engage while you monitor their input. I might take breaks, talk for 10 to 15 minutes, and then say, okay, let's apply this. I direct them to the Google Doc I've created and observe what people are doing. It's about variety and engagement. These are the ways you truly connect with people who are remote from you. Speaker. Okay, other questions? Audience member. Pointing, who, oh. I've got to look for where the mic is. Audience member. This may be similar to the first question. Speaker. Sure. Audience member. But I do a lot of expert witness testimony. What's your recommendation for handling cross-examination, specifically a hostile one? Speaker. I feel like I'm being cross-examined right now. Audience member. It's very hostile. In any speaking situation that has some planned elements, I recommend identifying key themes you believe are important. With each of these themes, have supporting examples and concrete evidence. You don't go in with memorized phrases. Rather, you have ideas and themes that you can adapt as needed. When I'm in situations where people are interrogating me, I have certain themes I want to communicate. I ensure that I can convey them in a way that fits the moment. If the situation is hostile, the single best tool to buy yourself time and answer efficiently is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is like the Swiss Army knife of communication. If you remember the show MacGyver, it's your MacGyver tool. When a question comes in, the way you paraphrase it gives you the chance to reframe it, think about your answer, pause, and ensure you understand it correctly. In those situations, if you have the opportunity to paraphrase, say something like, so what you're really asking about is X, Y, and Z. That gives you a moment to employ one of these techniques. Now, I've never been an expert witness, because I'm not an expert on anything, but I believe these tools could be helpful. Speaker. The microphone is back there. Audience member. Thank you. Another audience member. Thank you so much. This has been so helpful and enjoyable this morning. Would you please show the last screen so we can get the name of the book you've written and the information? Speaker. Absolutely. Audience member. I think you might even have an opportunity. It's on the sheet too. Everything I said is on the back of that sheet, but I'm happy to have this behind me while I talk. Other questions? Yes, please. Yes, I work with groups that represent many different cultural backgrounds. Yes. So, are there any caveats, or is this a universal strategy? In terms of your perspective as the speaker, yes, I believe this applies. However, whenever you communicate, part of listening is also considering your audience and their expectations. What are the cultural expectations of the audience you're presenting to? There may be certain norms and rules they expect. When I travel and give talks, I have to take into account where I'm presenting. I help with the Ignite program. If you haven't heard about it here at the GSB, it's fantastic. I recently did a presentation in one of these incredible classrooms with cameras, teaching 35 people in Santiago, Chile. I needed to understand the cultural expectations of that area, what they expect, and how willing they are to participate when I ask them to engage. So, it's part of that listening step, reflecting on what the audience expects. I think we have time for 2 more questions, and then I'll stick around afterward for anyone who has individual questions. Some of these folks really want me to stay on schedule. Yes, please. I wanted to ask you a question. One of the things you've done effectively in your talk, and I've seen other great speakers do, is interject humor. How do you balance the risks and rewards of using humor? Well, first, thank you. I appreciate all of you laughing. That's the sum total of all my jokes. You've heard them all. I'm not funny beyond those jokes. Humor is a wonderful tool for connection, but it's also very risky. Cultural differences can affect whether something is funny or not. What research tells us is that if you're going to try humor, self-deprecating humor is your safest bet. It carries the least risk. There's nothing worse than making a joke and getting no response. It actually sets you back further than if you hadn't made the joke at all. So, there are a few fundamentals to think about with humor. First, is it funny? How do you know? Ask other people first. Second, what happens if it doesn't work? Have a backup plan. And third, if you're worried about the answers to the first 2 questions, don't do it. One last question, please. The microphone is right here. And like I said, I'll stick around afterward. Yes, please. I'm sort of on the opposite side of this since I'm a journalist. And I frequently have to ask spontaneous questions to people who have been through media training. Yes, so, any tips for finding chinks in the armor? A way to ask a question without being antagonistic, but still get something close to a straight answer? Well, let me give you 2 answers. 1, I have young boys, and the power of why is great. Just ask why a couple of times, and you can break through those first layers of media training. You know, why do you say that? How do you feel about that? The second bit is to what I have found successful in getting people to respond more authentically is changing the way I ask questions. I do this to encourage more genuine answers. What I'll do is ask them to give advice. For example, I might say, what advice would you give to someone facing this challenge? Or, what advice would you give to someone in this situation? By asking for advice, it shifts the dynamic between me and the person answering. Instead of feeling like they are being interrogated, they see themselves as offering guidance. This often leads to much richer, more detailed responses. So the power of asking why, combined with putting someone in a position to give advice, can be incredibly effective. With that, I want to thank you very much. I welcome you to ask me questions later, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your reunion weekend. Thank you.